All right, good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. So, looking at the market here today and just kind of watching some of the action, and really the question comes: is today's action indicative of something that's going to come, in how investors are maybe going to shift their mindsets, or is today's action kind of just a global effect? Where, okay, we saw global stocks all down 1%. Okay, the U.S. is going to react. It's going to adjust to that. And boom. The biggest argument to just say, hey, you know what, this is just a global effect and investors are just reacting, here is the fact that the market just hasn't moved today. I mean, S&P futures opened, or the S&P opened right here where it is right now, and it's only had about a 5-point range each direction on it. So, considering the drop in overnight futures, to have a 10-point range on the market today is very, very light. So the range and the lack of movement, suggests that it's just an offset to what happened globally here overnight. We've talked about this week volumes and that, if this market is going to sell off, if this market is going to have some sort of precipitous drop, that kind of August swoon, that we're going to see some heavier volumes come in. And here we have S&P futures volumes here this week. And one thing you'll notice is that so far this morning, volumes significantly higher than any other day this week, and by a lot, okay, by a lot. And we would expect that on a gap down, and it's one of those where I go, okay, yep, we have the high volumes early on. Here's the 1-minute chart. We have the higher volumes early on, but are they high volumes? Well, we're not even averaging 4,000 a minute, and okay, we had the initial in the first 30 minutes, which is always the high volume time, but we have no volumes after that. In fact, they're coming down into the 2,000s, down into the 1,000s, and in fact, some minutes on S&P futures have hundreds in terms of the volume on them. It's a very light volume, kind of dissipation here. Now, I don't think that tells the story for the rest of the day because, a lot of times on a day like this, especially going into the weekend, we can see some volumes really elevate into the close, and I think that'll be meaningful if that happens. But as the volumes sit right now, I can't look at this and say, oh, this is just some high volume. All right, we got things really, they're gonna roll in a big, big way. We also have the VIX volatility. Despite the market itself, not moving a whole lot here today, we have seen the VIX move on up and, move on up throughout the course of the day, and is closer to its highs than its lows, despite the market being pretty much where it opened at. So we've seen protection being bought. Okay, we've seen investors willing to pay up more for that protection. And to me, this is a signal that suggests, hey, there could be further drop to come, and makes me look and go, okay, do I really want to step into this dip here just yet, or do I need to wait here just a little bit on it? And for me, this is one of those where it says, okay, you wait to buy the dip, but all right, if I'm waiting to buy the dip, can I play a little bit of downside here? And so as I've kind of gone through things, I'm looking at saying, okay, are any of the metrics changing? Right? I mean, we have yes, a down day today, okay, but are any of the metrics changing? Well, let's take a look at some of the caps. So small caps. Oh, the market's down today? Oh, well, small caps forgot the memo, and they are trading in the green. Okay. That's probably a currency effect, right? U.S. dollar up big with the Turkish lira and pushing up into new highs. Wow, what a move. And, it's one that, We have seen small caps do well on days where the market has been up or where the U.S. dollar has been up pretty big. And that's what we're seeing here today. Do we see anything here in something like the bullish percent index? Here's the bullish percent index. Not much of a move here, right? Not much of a move here with it. Pretty much sitting where, where it was on Wednesday. And, no real indication that stocks are moving to a large enough degree that we would say, there's some real bearishness out there. Take a look at what happened to the bullish percent index before the big drop in February. Bullish percent index made some sizable moves down. Hasn't even come close to that here just yet. So, we have one uptick in the VIX. We have not a whole lot here with the bullish percent index. So I don't see a whole lot that says, okay, big selling swoon upcoming. Let's take a look at the number of stocks trading above or below the 7-day moving average. 193. So what does this mean? This means we have about 40% of the S&P 500 stocks trading above the 7-day moving average. That's a little different than what we had earlier this week. That's a sizable number. We had about 80% trading above, between 75 and 80% yesterday. And, this is a sizable drop. This means we have a lot of stocks breaking below short-term moving averages. Not everything, but a lot. And this to me is a little bit of a warning sign. We could continue to go through different market internals and everything else like that, but the bottom line is the market vibe has moved to 5. What's that mean? It means it's still bullish. It's still the bulls still have the majority of the advantages, but it's come off 2 points from its high this week, and it means that a little bit more selling, could see a little bit of a change in that. And I look at this market as market that is in desperate need of a little bit of a pullback, and it got a catalyst for it here today. And ultimately, I think the pullback will be buyable, but I do think it's too early to buy the pullback. Here overall, I think, when I go look at a JP Morgan or something like that, that I would like to buy, this is the first move back below the 7-day moving average, right? This is the first time we've had that in a while, and a lot of these stocks kind of need a little bit of correction in them, a little bit of consolidation, or a little bit of dip. To come into them before, buyers are going to be willing to step back in, to a lot of things out there in this market. With looking to start the 100K challenge next Tuesday, I'm kind of excited to see this. And okay, let's get a little bit of pullback, or, let's get a little bit of increased volatility here. So, maybe we could play a little bit. Maybe the challenge starts out. We'll be in that August swoon. We get started on the downside and go. And I think today it will go a long way into setting up the charts into next week. I do think, you take a look at something like an Amazon. We talked on Monday. You want to know if the market is ready for a big drop? Just take a look at Amazon. If Amazon breaks the lows from the prior day, market's probably ready to correct. So far today, Amazon hasn't broken the lows from yesterday. Just like all week, it hasn't broken the lows from the day prior. And, to me, I think you can go and look at all the market internals out there. You can go look at volumes. You can go look at, bullish percent indexes. You can go look at highs, lows, and advanced decline ratios and all of that fun stuff out there, right? But if you want to keep it really simple in this market, I think it just comes down to, is Amazon holding on to the prior day's lows? If so, all right, bulls still in charge. If not, bears may have a little bit of say in the short term. Now, I know this doesn't affect every stock, but I'm talking market wise, and how the market itself is overall. And when I saw this morning that Amazon really wasn't really moving to the downside at all, it kind of took off a little bit of that kind of inkling you get. You wake up, you see the market gapping down, can I make some money on some puts? oh, well, Amazon's not really selling. Okay, yeah, some things will sell off, but they're probably not going to be too much that sells off further than where it's opening or where it is in the first 15 minutes here. So, I do think Amazon is still a very big tell out there, and something that matters, in a big way or a very easy way to kind of boil this market down. And so for me, today, it's about a global adjustment, a global effect. The U.S. equity markets adjusting to what happened in Europe and Asia overnight. And we can see that with things like the iron ore sector, like Vale and BHP and Rio and all these gap downs in these names, the Caterpillars of the world, which are lagging and underperforming, the Boeings of the world, which are, pushing on down here. And so it's one where I think today's a global effect reaction, but I don't look at it as enough of a sign of, hey, there's a big route coming. So far, it looks like, hey, you know what, this is going to be a buyable dip, and as long as some of these things hold up, overall it'll be a buyable dip as we get into next week. But again, a lot could happen. A lot of things could change here in the short run. So far today, there are no Katie signals on the board. There are no trend rider signals on the board. We have something like a Boeing that's piercing the lower band with the bands tight or relatively tight. This is a trend rider bear signal. It'll have enough volume by the end of the day to actually trigger. But we don't use trend rider on large cap stocks because, well, it just doesn't work the way it does on small and mid cap stocks. So, we had a trend rider on Amazon this week, but again, large cap name, Boeing downside here today, but again, kind of a large cap name there that, that just doesn't have the accuracy that I would like to have and to go out and get into. So anyway, that's that's kind of how I look at the market here today. I want to be a buyer at JP Morgan, so I'm happy to see a little bit of pullback, but is this pullback a buy spot? Not typically. Fresh gaps below the 7-day moving average typically aren't buyable on that day. There tends to be a little bit of downside to it. If there's not, okay, can pick it up as it pops above today's highs. Things like UPS, which have had a decent week, they're breaking below the lows from the last few days, so not exactly a spot that I want to be picking it up at, here overall. We talked about the housing and Home Depot a little bit this morning. I've watched Home Depot today, and, one of the things I want to see some volume come in if to play this to the downside. I do think this is a decent setup if you're looking for downside exposure with about 197.20 as a tight stop there for it, but halfway decent there as far as downside. We don't have we don't have enough volume right here to suggest that this is any major kind of support. So to see it kind of bust a little bit down into the 194, 193 area short run, looks like the path of least resistance here. Now we're going to start the new 100K challenge on Tuesday. I've been asked, what am I going to do with Mike Valero? Am I going to hold it through that and all that? Because I do have time on the option. Bottom line, Valero not going anywhere here today. It's most likely going to close at 115. The pin risk on Valero going into this week was very low, but if you look at where the open interest is on Valero here. For this week, you can see there's about 1,100 right here at 15. And so, with nothing else going on, with no volume coming in, market makers have a little bit of control, and we've seen them exercise that a little bit today and, sell when there's been a few buys. And I suspect that they're going to close this at 115 here today. In fact, I strongly suspect that they're going to close this at 115 today. They don't always have enough influence there. They don't have a huge incentive to make it happen, from a financial standpoint. So they're not going to put huge resources into it, but it's not going to take a heck of a whole lot, here overall. So that's what I expect on the day. It's still one that I strongly suspect goes higher. and much higher. I'm not talking, this isn't something I'm talking about. Oh, well, this is just gonna pop up here to 117.5. This is one that the way this chart is, it's likely 125, 130 as far as what it's going to move. It's just when is that going to take place? And if you've ever traded Valero, that can just kind of come out of the blue, and just happen before you even have a chance to jump in. So I'm looking to hold this over the weekend. It'd be nice if it rallied a little bit into the weekend, but either way, I'm going to hold it over the weekend here, see what Monday brings. As far as am I not going to hold this while I'm doing the other challenge, I haven't made the decision. It depends on Valero. I'm going to trade Valero for what Valero is, and heck, I may pop out of it and go get into it for the 100K challenge on Tuesday. So we'll see what we'll see what early next week brings in that regard. Now, one of you emailed me this morning and said, "Hey, I really want to get into something. Give me something." And I responded and I said, look, I'm pretty light right now. I would like to get into stuff. I'm not jumping into a whole lot. And then I sent a few things that I thought were interesting. But, for me, that's what this market's about right here. There's a lot of things that are kind of interesting. But, stuff where I go, wow, my signal is really strong. I have a good probability and a good risk reward. Not a lot of that out there that I have for the stuff that I watch and that I trade and that I want to be a part of. I'd love to be a buyer of some Boeing, right? But it's just too early, right? In fact, path of least resistance is probably still a little bit lower. I'd like to buy some Caterpillar, but path of least resistance probably still a little bit lower, right? I'd like to be a buyer of some IBM. But if I buy here at 144, what do I do if it gets to 143? This is something I expect to break the 200-day moving average. To me, it's not this is kind of like Valero. It's not a matter of if, it's much more a matter of when. And as I go and look at how a lot of the stocks have moved here today, it's a lot like Visa, where you just go, okay, more consolidation in the works for it. American Express, okay, pull back to the 7 here today, or something like, if I'm going to go jump in, hey, go grab some Amazon and run with it. I mean, it's an outperformer. It's holding up very well today. You can sell it if it breaks, to Thursday's highs, and you could get some exposure if that's what you're, looking for out there in the markets here today. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a great one, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.